Welcome to TradeSense, where Windward brings together the brightest minds in global trade, maritime, and AI to break down the biggest developments shaping our industry. I'm Michelle Wiese Bockmann, Senior Maritime Intelligence Analyst here at Windward, and in each short episode, we're going to be delivering insights that matter in shipping. Today, we're diving into the Middle East crisis with Salvatore Mercogliano. Sal, thanks very much for joining us. How are you going?
I'm doing well, Michelle, and I'm very excited to be with you on this show. I can't wait. We've been wanting to talk together for such a long time, and now I have that opportunity. I'm just excited.
Yeah, thanks very much. So I'm really keen to get your insights from Marine Money in New York, a preeminent shipping conference where all of the key ship owners and financial leaders were gathered in one place at a critical time in shipping, especially in the Strait of Hormuz. What were the insights that came out of there that we need to know about? What's important?
Well, I mean, the word Hormuz was said quite a bit. I mean, obviously, big centers of attention. The CEO of Frontline had a very passionate talk about what happened with the Front Eagle, the tanker that got in the collision with the Dark Fleet vessel, the Adeline, the fire that caused, and literally the almost impossibility to locate the owners of those vessels. But the biggest issue I got that came out was really very, very hopeful in some ways and very positive. The idea that, number one, very unlikely that we see the straits closed. They didn't think that was actually very viable. They think in the worst case, the market will adjust to whatever situation happens there. They were very bullish, as always, on tankers. They were looking at the idea that oil is going to keep flowing in and out of the region. They've faced these disruptions in the past. We've seen threats of closing the straits, and never in its history has it really been closed. So I think in terms of the financial side, the business side, the trader side, we're definitely seeing a very bullish kind of view on that. And remember, this is the same group that's dealt with the Houthi in the Red Sea. They've had to deal with a lot of situations that have been thrown with them, and they've been able to really adjust shipping to meet the needs.
Did they talk about what they're doing right now and whether or not they're prepared to take their ships into the Arabian Gulf? And I ask that because Lars Bastard, who is the chief executive of Frontline, was quoted as saying that he's no longer going to take any more fixtures that will expose the tankers there. So did you get a feeling that this attitude may become a more fixed one amongst others?
I mean, there's some great conversations about alternative sources to get oil. There was a discussion among the LPG shippers about holding ships outside the Gulf until basically the berths are ready to go in and load, basically minimize their exposures as much as they can through the straits, avoid any potential problems. That I think right now we're dealing with a very, as you know, fluctuating fuel market in terms of the availability of oil out there. One of the big things that was talked quite a bit has to do with the pulling out and sanctioning of tankers. That was one of the big ones, talking about just the vast number of VLCCs that are now on that sanction list, the potential for the EU to lower the price cap on the Russian fuel. So one of the big issues was not so much the supply of fuel, but really supply of tankers. And that seemed to be the one that's really drawing a lot of attention, that further sanctions by countries will eliminate these vessels out. And there was even discussion about, should peace happen, what happens when all those vessels are released from the sanctions and available to the marketplace. There was a lot of concern about all of a sudden the market being flooded with capacity.
So there's definitely an Iranian theme emerging from the discussions with the sanctions and also with the Strait of Hormuz. One of my big observations from this week is the sudden and very extreme disruption to navigation from GPS jamming. I mean, this is something that we've seen before on a small scale. What's happening in the Strait of Hormuz is something I've never seen before. And, you're a maritime historian. Tell me a little bit more about where this fits in, gray zone aggression and new maritime tactic.
Well, the GPS spoofing, jamming we're seeing. So, for example, Front Eagle was making its run out of the Persian Gulf. It was coming from Iraq, heading down. You see the vessel literally, on its AIS transported to Ukraine. And then all of a sudden, every ship in the Persian Gulf is in a circle on land in Iran. And, that's just an example of GPS spoofing. Now, we don't know the cause. It's either the Iranians, but there's a conflict going on. So, obviously, we're seeing a lot in the electromagnetic spectrum being done. And while navigation may not be directly affected. I sailed ships for a living.
Mm.
I can look out the big window and see where ships are going. It does put a strain on the crews. And I think that's one of the big issues, that as your navigation abilities get degraded, you're putting more and more on the crews to be able to know where they are, avoid collisions, and to safely navigate the vessel. And again, what we're seeing, Michelle, is really just a new level of threats that are being thrown at the mariners. And this electromagnetic spectrum style of attacks is new, and we've worried about this for a long time.
So just explain for somebody that's not quite familiar with the term GPS jamming, how does it happen and how does it affect a ship? And if you're the master, what alternatives or what are you using and how does it impact your job?
So in many ways, what we're talking about is the navigation system in your car is very similar to what we see on ships. And we rely so much on our navigation system sometimes that, we expect it to tell us when to turn left and right. On a ship, it's even more so because you can actually tie your helm control into your GPS. So you can put a series of waypoints in, and as you're sailing down the Persian Gulf, that waypoint may be moved from where you think it is to somewhere else, which could cause the vessel to turn, could cause collisions, could cause groundings. And what you have to do then is be more redundant, more manual. And that obviously puts more wear on the crews, and you create more problems. You create issues about you don't know where you are. And therefore, navigation becomes an issue. These ships are operating with very small crews, something we've seen happen. A lot of these crews now are being drawn from different places than normal because of issues with crewing and costs, especially after COVID. And so it creates problems on the operation of the vessel. And again, it's another new threat that we're seeing emerge.
So I crunched the numbers today, and I think on average there's been about 970 ships identified as having their AIS signals interfered with. What sort of risk does that represent, do you think, for all of the ships in the area if you're all experiencing the same sort of difficulties?
Well, the Straits of Hormuz is a heavily trafficked area. We're talking about 125 ships on average going through the straits. I've sailed through it a few times, beyond what you can see on, any sort of AIS tracker. There are small vessels in and around the region, dhows, fishing vessels. And when all of a sudden a system you're using to help determine your location goes out, you've got to shift over to a manual system. You have to manually input your system. You're requiring the mates up on the bridge to determine their positioning by visual sightings. You can get low visibility in that area. I've got caught in a sandstorm going through the Straits of Hormuz, and visibility went down to nothing. And so what we could see is the potential for collisions, for environmental damages. And again, this is an offshoot of a larger conflict, something not unusual. We saw this during the tanker war of the 80s. We didn't have this GPS spoofing, but we had hazards being executed against shipping at this time. And so it adds another layer to the commercial shipping problem that we're seeing in this area. And I would argue it just puts more and more work onto the crews, and it's not unusual for them to be very tired. And it's when you're tired and don't have a lot of information that accidents happen. I think the Front Eagle accident, for example, is not unusual.
One of the initial expectations, and there was fevered speculation a week ago that the Strait of Hormuz would close. And of course, people like yourselves looked at that speculation and knew, well, that's just not going to happen. Can you explain historically the reason for that assessment? Because commercial traffic is uninterrupted despite the risk and the threats. There's just, increased insurance costs, increased freight costs. So far, so good. But why is that? What does history tell us?
Well, I mean, if you go back to the 80s and the tanker war, for example, we had 450 ships attacked over the course of 8, 9 years in the 80s. The straits never closed. But I would say that it is possible to close the straits. I kind of disagree, because you know as well as I do that the issue would drive ships away isn't so much the physical threat, it's going to be the cost. It's the insurance. It's the crews balking going through the region. That's what we see in the Red Sea, for example. The Houthis over a year and have attacked maybe 100 and so ships. They've hit maybe 2 dozen and have only sunk 2, killed 4 mariners. But if that insurance cost goes up, that's going to be what will drive ships away more than anything else, especially when there's alternative sources to get the oil, get the gas. And that is what is the big, I think, danger in the area is, do we further fracture the global supply chain and start regionalizing it? All of a sudden, does Qatar lose its ability to supply gas and instead it shifts over to West Australia? Or are we pulling LNG and LPG out of the United States? And that is going over to Europe. It was a very interesting discussion at Marine Money. You only have 10 ships a day that can go through the Neo-Panamax lane in the Panama Canal. As more ships are vying for that lane, what happens to the gas carriers? Can they get there? This is one of the reasons we saw that huge bidding process start taking place in the Panama Canal. I think historically, one of the things that we've seen, and we've seen this time and time again, is that shipping will find the way. It's like water on the sidewalk. It'll find the cracks. You know, when you close the Suez Canal in 1956, ships went around. When you close it from 67 to 75, ships went around. Not only did they go around, but they got bigger, and we changed shipping to do it. We see that today with the Houthis, and I think we'll see it with the Persian Gulf.
So, what signals do you think stakeholders should be watching now for stress, tension, risk? Where do you think the pain or pressure points are in the Hormuz at the moment?
I'm really shocked at the amount of geopolitical aspects that are impacting ship here on such a basis. I was joking with someone at Marine Money. It's like you almost need political scientists on the staff of every tanker firm and,
Yeah.
and brokerage house, because where's the next issue that's going to happen? I think one of the things that, and you know as well as I do, one of the things that shippers are flexible. They know how to adjust, and especially in the tanker sector, they know where to find oil, how to shift sources. I joke, whereas the container liners are the set schedule people, the tankers are the Ubers. They go to wherever the traffic is, and they will figure out where to go. And I think one of the things that they have to be looking at right now is the potential for the Persian Gulf to become further obstructed, not blocked, but further hazards being thrown up in their way. And when you throw up hazards, that means cost, that means escalation, that means delays, that means that the fuel may not flow at the same rate we want. And then the question is, what alternatives are out there? We're in a period of time where, unlike the 80s, the U.S. is not the big consumer of oil out of the Persian Gulf. It's not even Europe now, it's China. And I think that's the other element that was not really talked about too much. But China consuming the vast majority of that fuel coming out of the Persian Gulf, that's the big factor. I think that's an issue that would keep the Persian Gulf open more and more because of that relationship between China and Iran. And let's not forget India and Southeast Asia. We're changing the consumption charts these days for where energy is going.
So that's it for this episode of TradeSense. Thanks for joining us, Sal. It was really valuable to break down these current security risks in the Gulf and just hear about what the industry thinks and is doing right now. Thanks very much once again.
Thanks for having me.
If you found this episode informative and useful, please share this video, follow Windward for more insights, and stay tuned. We've got another expert conversation coming up soon.